Great. So welcome everyone. This is Keys to Avoiding Deep Trouble, a Zoom away call brought to you by TRAK Kayaks. And this program is part of a series we call Beyond the Boat. And it includes the 3 steps to kayaking and keys to avoiding deep trouble. My name is Hans. I'm hailing from the west coast of British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And today's subject is seamanship and navigating our ideal paddler's progression, not only for yourself, but also how, if you're mentoring or guiding other folks, how to put together progressions that are really appropriate for maximizing their building confidence and competence in the water, but also how to ensure that there's a really strong foundation under their skill set and a way to maximize their fun and safety on the water. I'm really proud to introduce our special guest here. I'd like to introduce Juan, and he's coming to us from Argentina. Juan is a creative mind behind a brand and a company called Andemita. He started this company in search for new challenges and deeper involvement in the creation of wilderness experiences. Juan is Argentine and is raised in Buenos Aires, where he first started his seamanship training sailing with his family as a kid. And the inspiration he got as a teenager was to really begin traveling to Patagonia with friends for hiking and fishing and camping, and years later became a rock climber and a mountaineer. And through that passion, really developed his skills and a profession in outdoor leadership and outdoor education. He also works as a writer and a photographer and a graphic designer. He stumbled upon the National Outdoor Leadership School in his progression as an outdoor educator. And really his professional entrance into sea kayaking began there with the National Outdoor Leadership School as he built his skills up beyond mountaineering and rock climbing. And so he has now been 10 years in business driving Andemita. It's been the main focus of his entrepreneurial life as an adventure outfitter in Patagonia, and he balances that with raising a family in Bariloche. A couple of other side notes to that: while he is a senior instructor with the National Outdoor Leadership School, he's also an AAGM mountain guide. He is a UIMLA International Mountain Leader. He is certified in wilderness first responder medicine. He is a master educator of Leave No Trace. He's got AVI1, avalanche awareness certification, and is a certified park and mountain kayak guide throughout Argentina, as well as an American Canoe Association level 3 coaster kayaker. It's a lot to introduce you. Juan, we're proud to welcome you to the call. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here. Yeah. Hola a todos from Patagonia.
Awesome. Excellent. Well, thank you, Juan. I want to start right away with the idea about this brand that you carry. What is the meaning of Andemita?
Andemita, really, it's a word that I created when I wanted to start my own business. It comes from a word called andesita, which is a stone actually that you can find here in the Andes, but that sounds like small in Spanish at least. So it was changing, and then suddenly I found out that the word mita means season. So andemita would be like your season in Patagonia, and that's where the name really granted in me. And basically the idea and the concept of really providing a different type of adventure to people that want to come, especially independent travelers that are searching for different experiences here in Patagonia, especially in northern Patagonia where I'm located, both in Argentina and in Chile, but basically focusing in the activities and in the wilderness aspect of adventures, no? So that's more or less where the concept comes, and we basically try to focus our work here in Bariloche, and the kayaking is mainly in our lakes, basically in the lakes district.
Really fantastic. So I love the tagline from Andemita, which is Andemita is your turn to explore the Andes. So it sounds like you really offer to your guests and to your clients experiences throughout the Andes and throughout Patagonia in mountaineering and sea kayaking and lake kayaking, as well as hiking and other outdoor pursuits.
Yes, exactly. The good thing about Bariloche and Northern Patagonia is that you basically have everything kind of like pre-consolidated in one region. So you have options to go and do like backpacking traverses. Then we have a hut system that we go and do hut-to-hut traverses, hiking with a light pack, and then you have the lake, which is a huge lake. You can spend at least 5 days kayaking in the wilderness without probably meeting anybody almost. There's very little amount of boat activity and so on. And there's only a couple of ranches around the shoreline. So basically we have a broad range of terrain to enjoy, with the advantage that it's still Patagonia, but the weather is not as harsh as Southern Patagonia, for example. That there, it's a different type of environment for sure.
Sure, the banana belt of Patagonia, if you will.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what you're describing really, Juan, it sounds like in many ways where you are is the hub of Patagonia, and you've got incredible concentrations from there. Describe for us, if you will, Bariloche as an area from a paddler's perspective.
Well, from a paddler's perspective, it's basically you're talking about the area itself. You're focusing in freshwater paddling. That's why I was asking. A lot of different lake systems. Many of them you can link them together. They're connected by small creeks that you can, or portage, or you can paddle through them. Or you can focus like in the main lake of Nahuel Huapi that, it's so big that in windy days you can get, 5-foot waves and all kinds of conditions. I always say when I look at it and it looks like the Chilean fjords, it's like, oh, Nahuel Huapi, it's kind of like aspirational to be an ocean today. And basically, then you have other lakes that are smaller, depending on the orientation of the wind. You can get, more sheltered routes or more exposed routes, a lot of different areas to go and kayak by the day, or do like a 2-day traverse. So it's a lot of different activities of itineraries to actually do kayaking in Bariloche, surrounded by beautiful mountains, with obviously at this time of the year, snow-covered peaks. Then as the summer goes by, obviously we lose all the snow and the water level of the lake starts descending. The water starts getting warmer, which is nice also. So you can practice, we run courses here and you can practice a lot of the skills, not getting so cold. But then the other cool thing about Bariloche is that it's kind of like very close to the Pacific Ocean. Like we cross the Andes into Chile, and we are like in 5-hour drive. We can be like kayaking the open ocean of the Pacific, and close to Valdivia area, or south to that. You can 1 more hour drive a little bit to the south, and you're in the fjords. So we have relatively easy access to the fjords of Chile or to the Pacific waves, which are completely different to the Atlantic, which is also pretty close by. Like we drive here, we have a route that it's partially paved, that in 6 hours we get to the Atlantic Ocean, and we go kayaking there. A completely different environment, because in Chile it's like super dense forest, green mountains, like the Andes, drop into the ocean pretty fast. Very dramatic, very beautiful in that way. And then to the Atlantic, you have a much more like a semi-desert, similar to like, I don't know, Western Wyoming or like the center of Canada, type of steppe. But then suddenly you have some cliffs, some dunes, and the beach. And that's the ocean over there. With a much less like, how do you say? Bound, like the waves are much less organized, I would say. So we have, and it's a much more windy in a way. It's a little more disorganized than the Pacific.
It doesn't have the Western Pacific swell.
The swell, that's the
rolling
word.
in and breaking on the beach. Yeah.
Sorry about my English. That I've been too a pandemic without really speaking too much English because of the international travel shutdown. So, but yeah, like in the Andes, you know, you have swell like in the Atlantic, but not as much as the Pacific. But it's
Terrific.
still like very different environment. So Bariloche is kind of like there in the middle, and it provides us a lot of access to different lakes, to the mountains, to the Pacific, and to the Atlantic. So it's really for me the place to be.
Really
For sure.
fantastic. So, you know, given where you are in your position in the hub, I'm just curious, Juan, what's in the lineup for you? What's your heart set on for your next personal adventure, sea kayaking?
Well, definitely, you know, it's been 2 years since we can cross over to Chile, and the pandemic started right before a trip that we had planned to go back into the Chilean fjords and explore some of those channels and get to some tidewater glaciers, and enjoying the amazing wildlife that you can find on those fjords. You know, that it's similar in a way to maybe like the Prince William Sound area and so on, but complete solitude, you know, and with a lot more harsh weather. You know? Like, so we have with some friends we have a trip planned to go and explore the fjords again. We usually do 1 or 2 trips a year to the Chilean fjords, and then to the Atlantic we go more often because it's in a way it's faster. But that's the next. We're kind of all craving to see what the Chilean government decides to do to see when we can cross over again.
Terrific. And by the fjords, are you talking about like the like the Rio Chompanos and or Tempanos in the archipelago of Chonos, or all the way south near
No,
like
next trip
Magallanes?
is going to be like in the Magallanes region, close to Punta Arenas.
Yeah.
In that area, like Peel Channel, Europa Channel, like all that area that it's a little further to the south, and you get a lot more glaciated base, basically, you know. So that's
The
our
far
goal.
end. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Really great.
yeah.
So let me ask you this question. Juan, you basically run a guiding company. It's an outfitting support company. You have a host of folks that work with you that are fellow guides, and you mentor and you train them, and you mentor and you train participants and clients as well. What do you like most about teaching and coaching kayak skills and kayak expeditioning?
For me, it's the part of how to teach people to develop judgment and self-awareness. You know, how you find a progression for people to like focus on the hard skills and the technique, but mainly like work on, okay, I'm trying to learn this technique, but am I really learning it? And when am I going to be able to use it? Is this technique, what is this technique giving me? So really working on a progression that allows people to really assess where their stage as a kayaker is, you know, and basically build confidence in one way on through that skill set and through that awareness, and also build judgment, you know, which is kind of like the biggest challenge, because people, you know, they go and learn a technique and they want to go apply it, but then it's like, okay, well, but if you apply it, first you need to practice it in certain skill set and certain environment, so you feel comfortable and you're like really enjoying that progression, you know, and you're not really panicking or like, you know, going to points that you're not really sure if you're going to be able to make it.
I get it.
Does that make sense?
It sounds like it's really the empowerment really is the piece that is the outcome of all that.
Yeah, the leadership, like having people being able to make their own decisions and being independent, in how they're thinking and which are their skill sets, you know.
Really fantastic. That's super aligned with the philosophy of TRAK, where our brand promise, if you will, our core purpose is life unleashed. It's that it's helping people find their way in that. That's going to empower them to be more and do more.
Mm-hmm.
Really fantastic. So today's subject is really seamanship and navigating the ideal paddler's progression for ourselves, or how to guide it for others as well. But creating some intentional design around that is really today's subject. So want to first ask you right off the bat, why is that important?
Well, basically, basically it's kind of like seeing a kayaker in my perspective, and basically my mentor's perspective is like seeing a kayaker as a whole person that has to make decisions, has to gain skills, and has to work with other people in a team, no?
Yes.
Unless you're a solo kayaker. But basically focusing in not only one skill, but basically in 3 skills, knowing how does the environment work very well, how do you react, and how you work as a kayaker and as a leader and as a team player, and then the technical part of it.
Yeah, so that's really in line with what you like most about teaching kayaking. It sounds like is the importance of that is by developing leadership and judgment, you are better on a team. You're able to more effectively contribute and support a team and increase the safety and the fun for everybody on board, which keeps us out of trouble and probably even helps to manage some anxiety of new paddlers. Let me ask you this question. I think what you're pointing to a little bit is, how to manage both the balance between learning, which is a little bit out of our comfort zone, but not being so out of our comfort zone that we do reach that area of high anxiety, which can disable us a little bit. I think one thing I want to do right now is just bring up get a sense of poll from people of about how much they paddle. How often do you practice sea kayaking outside of your comfort zone? Let's run this poll right now, and I invite everybody on the call here just to create some indication. How often do you practice sea kayaking outside of your comfort zone, and to what degree? Do you never do it, and you're just a fair weather paddler, or do you sometimes do it, and maybe by sneaking up to you, or is it a measured and controlled way in which you can ride the edge of your comfort zone to maximize learning? Or do you just go for it and find yourself in uncomfortable situations and learn from, unpacking it after you are happy that you even survived? So wanted to put that out there. And to some degree, maybe you just love to get scared, and if you're not scared, it's not sea kayaking for you. Love to get a sense of that from folks, and we're going to spend another 30 seconds on this, but we're going to keep this up while we continue talking here, Juan. And so what's the problem with not having a progression design and not focusing on some of these elements that you are asserting that are super important for long-term development?
Well, the problem first is, the main thing that I always tell people is like, first, when you're panicking or when you're afraid, you usually you don't learn and you don't process what you're going through. So ideally, when we're thinking about progression and when we're thinking about an environment that it's always changing and that can be always becoming more challenging, you need to be able to plan ahead and to kind of have an idea of kind of like a protocol. How do you react and how do you take upon actions when when shit hits the fan? So the more exposure you get to certain elements and the more information and techniques you have, basically you're better prepared to overcome those situations. So basically having the whole idea of progression is going from less to more. That doesn't mean that you need to start as a beginner and always become a professional. I always tell people in the courses, it's like, this course is not oriented to expedition paddlers. Maybe you want to kind of like what the poll you're doing. Maybe you always want to kayak when the lake is flat, but some days the lake is going to be flat, and then in the afternoon it's going to become choppy. So you need to have the skills to return home comfortable and not afraid of what just happened.
Got it. So
progression.
Yeah, so in many ways, the problem with not having sort of progressive design is that it stunts our growth, it retards our growth as kayakers and can keep
Yeah,
us from going out, and it ultimately limits our opportunities. And we can get into situations that can be hazardous as a result of
exactly.
that. I'm going to keep this poll open for another 10 seconds. So now's your last chance. But, let's talk about the opportunity that if we do lay this groundwork with our mentors and our peers, what does it afford us? What does it open up for us if we can actually do what you're describing?
Well, you basically develop awareness and skills to avoid objective hazards first. Like, and you can build confidence on the people, on your students, so they are, for example, they're less afraid of leaving that comfort zone. One of the basic examples of the courses that is, the first thing that we teach people and even clients is like, okay, you're afraid of tipping over. Okay, let's tip over, but let's do it in a controlled way. No,
Yeah,
so you kind of like, so we're removing that fear away, and we're building your confidence. So once you're confident, your body is relaxed, and we all know that if your body is relaxed, we're better kayakers just by
got
that.
it. Awesome.
You
So,
know,
so I think we're talking to the right group here. Just I'm sharing the results of this poll, and 90% of us really like to work that comfort zone in a measured and controlled fashion to really maximize learning. And only 10% of us just really go for it and are open to developing, good judgment through poor experiences. So let's move on then to, it sounds like the big idea then, Juan, is that really we have the opportunity here to give this community a holistic approach to viewing skills progression that really opens up a bigger world of paddling with more comfort and more safety. Did I get that right?
yeah, perfect.
Awesome, great. So let's unpack. I know you've developed some assets around this. You teach to this all the time, and some of the points that you brought up that you think is a good way to illustrate this is to first unpack seamanship, or in some circles, seapersonship, in really
Yeah,
simple terms, and then we can look at how to apply that to designing a skills progression.
perfect.
Great, awesome. So with your permission, I'm going to bring up just a couple of quick kind of assets that you've developed specifically for teaching not only your clients, but your staff and other educators on how to really have this conversation. Let's take a look at this slide and walk us through how you see seamanship in its various buckets.
Sounds great. Can I add like the short story of how this appeared? This slide came to me as well.
Of course, please do, Juan.
So basically, this for people is that we were in the Chilean fjords in a kayaking course, a month-long nose kayaking course, and Jim Chisholm, an amazing kayaker and seaman, he basically introduced this concept 20 years ago to me, and I always kept it in my head. And then I took his permission to use it in my courses and so on. And basically, we were trying to do this major crossing, and the wind picked up, and there were some big waves, and there was an island in the middle of the crossing, or let's say 2/3. So we decided to kind of like anchor there because the wind was getting crazy. And we spent eventually like 4 days on that island because we couldn't cross. There was almost very limited water supply, and we couldn't get into the water, so we need to do cover a lot of content, and that's when Jim introduced this slide that was it was always an amazing concept for me. So that's a little bit the story, where the first time that I saw it, it was like in a small tiny island in the fjords of Chile, and the idea basically,
it sounds like
it's kinda like,
it was completely applicable.
yes, it was completely, yeah. Especially because obviously we had debriefs of, how the decision was made to do the crossing to begin with, and so that's all the experiential learning that you get in expeditions. But yeah, it was, for me, what it's really interesting is, obviously, a lot of times here in Argentina, at least, I see kayakers focus so much like in one asset, in one part of the kayak, which is mainly the technical part. And for me, how how important it is to actually have a broader view and first, know exactly the environment that you're kayaking on, and that's covered in the part that says C, the objective, the environment, and what does it mean knowing the environment? It's like, I always tell people, like, for example, if you're kayaking here in Bariloche and you are from Bariloche, every day you're like driving along the lake, you should be looking at the lake as well and see what is the wind doing to the water, no? And which are the bays that are protected and the bays that are exposed, which are the peninsulas that get bouncing waters, and so on and so on. So really comprehend the elements of the weather, which are the weather patterns, what are the conditions of the water, and how in each area they react differently, So really knowing the environment, how does it work, which are the weather patterns, for example, and even like the forecast, like, okay, do I know how to read a forecast? Okay, I know. And how reliable is that forecast? If you only use it once, you have no idea. But if you're like constantly swapping through different slides, different websites, and really then observing the forecast said that today was going to be this windy, and eventually they miss it. It gives you information. The next time that you want to go into the water, you're like, okay, if it tells you 10 knots, it's probably going to be 15 knots. And 15 knots in the water here, that's what it creates, no? So really knowing, like understanding the environment as a whole and giving the importance to the environment, since, as you said before, the water changes so fast. We're paddling in a really dynamic environment, which what makes it fun, no?
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so everything objective, everything environmental.
Yeah.
And this isn't something that's a snapshot, but it's something that is a constant practice that will provide more data points along the way. And the more experience you have in a particular location and with different tools, then the more capable you are in this area. So it's something that's often developed before and well in advance of ever actually getting on the water.
Yeah, and the idea of a kayaker, if you're able to kayak in the place where you live, it's like this idea of constant guard, constant watching the environment, and how it's going to give you information every day.
Yeah, one of the great, that paints a picture of, like, if we are traveling as kayakers, it's one of the great reasons to really lean on local knowledge, right? And to work with guides and to work with outfitters who can give you weather updates and help you interpret those kinds of things, because they're just data points outside of the context of a working knowledge of it. They're not as useful.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Great. Let's move on to the next section of that.
Perfect. Yeah. So then man is basically, all our subjectivity, basically all our behavior, everything that has to do with our conducts, our self-awareness, our ways to respond, our ways to communicate and work with others, our tolerance for adversity, as it says there, and uncertainty, is basically everything that is related with me as a kayaker and how I kind of like my approach to kayaking. Am I a risk taker, or am I, more like laid back and if I'm a risk taker, are my kayaking partners the same way? And how do I deal if they are all risk takers? Who's going to be like at some point saying, oh, or not? Or like, am I going to be pushing people that maybe don't want to take the risk, and how I communicate and how I work as a team? And then also, a lot of times, I was telling you the other day, like, I kayak with a bunch of friends that are very skilled, but when shit hits the fan, some of them are like, oh, I can take care of myself, but I don't know if I can take care of others. So that kind of stuff you need to know before you get into the water. no?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So that
so
that area of awareness is really beyond yourself, but really it needs to include anybody you might also be paddling with, and something that's often overlooked.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Because some
Okay.
people say, okay, I'm going in a group, so I'm going to be safe, but maybe that group is only just a pile of individuals and not a really team.
Yeah. And so how about, let's move on to the third section to tell us about how you incorporate this third element.
So basically, the ship part is basically our ship, our kayak, really knowing how your kayak works. No, it's like which are the pros and cons of your kayak, which are the pros and cons of in general every kayak, and really like knowing how to fix it, knowing how it works, having the competence to really the maneuvers that you need, the skill level, the technical aspect of kayaking, which means also kind of what it said there, like rescue, braces, rolls. That's kind of like the most, in a way, for me, is the easiest one to assess because it's more tangible in a way. Like, and it's more like the hard skill part plus the physical part of knowing your gear, knowing all the gear that you need for that expedition or for that trip. Um, so, but it's definitely like very important because we get a lot of people here that want to kayak and they bring kayaks that are not really they're sinkable basically.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
not a good idea.
Like recreational boats. I love this. So you've basically taken that concept of seamanship and to make it really applicable, not unlike when you were, landing on the beach with your tail between your legs out of that crossing, you looked at these three different components in a debrief way so that they're really applicable. So it sounds like this is a really great tool that you can use not only to kind of frame the key elements of seamanship so you can intentionally look at each component, but a way to talk about them with your peers as well. It sounds like is like the graphic on the sand that Jim Chisholm graphed out is like, what's happening here with sea, what's happening here with man, what's happening here with ship. And
Yeah.
It sounds like it's a really great framework just to, in a really easy way, bring the conversation to light and actually address that awareness element within your team and within yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, super great. Awesome. So it sounds like this is a tool that you use regularly with your clients and your staff. Give us a quick example of how you actually sort of employ that for those of us that also work with folks on the water.
Well, basically, I use this slide on courses, and when I'm doing like a debrief of an experience, I divide the three sections and kind of like, okay, let's observe, kind of like using the risk management triangle for making decisions, and it's like, okay, what are the conditions in the sea now or in the lake, especially here, that you're looking at, and how are you guys doing? How are you feeling skill wise, strength wise, confidence wise, and so on. And then in the ship part would be like, okay, how are we doing? And are we carrying, are the kayaks too loaded? Are we're more like in a playground setting and so on. So it's like there are different ways to apply it, but for me, like the main idea is again like trying to get into the people's mind that kayaking is not only about doing braces and rolling, but more about like how do I work with the kayak and how does this like the lake or the ocean interferes with that activity.
Right. Awesome. Really great. I love how you can use this also as a tool to really understand collectively where the comfort zone is of the individuals and the group. And one thing that that Peter just identified in the chat room is that there's the key to managing is to manage and stretch the comfort zone with our learners and to keep it positive for learning, but avoid that crash into misadventure. And so this sounds like a really great tool to really have that discussion and to role model effective leadership in that with your peers and with your clients. So really great. So let's move on to how we actually then, how does this concept of seamanship, or how do we build a progression for ourselves and those that we mentor? What are your ideas on that?
Sorry, I couldn't get the last part.
Yeah, so it sounds like you've got a model, and I'll share this slide for it. Is how do you take this concept of breaking that seamanship into 3 sort of easy to talk about parts as a framework, you know, bring it down to something completely applicable, and then how do we use that to really, how do you help folks navigate that you coach, or how do they build progressions so that they can advance in a profound way?
Well, so answering your question, I did that that kind of like framework, no, which is basically going from you know less coaching and training and experiences and increasing both through, especially through experience and coaching, because at least in my career, I met a lot of people that maybe have a lot of experience, like a lot of hours in the lake or hours in the ocean, but with little training. So their curve of learning is very slow, you know. So the idea for me progression is like, okay, you need to get exposure, good, and with coach training, no. That doesn't need to be all the time in courses, because you can go out, especially in a guided trip, or you can go out with friends that have more skills than you, and they're still coaching you. It's in a peer setting, but it's still coaching.
Okay, great. Juan, let's pause there for a second. I just want to bring to everyone's attention, is that we're showing a couple of slides here, which is a kind of a heretics, if you will, for creating a progression. I've shared this in the chat space. If it's hard to read on the screen, you can go there and download it. But one of the things that the assertion you're making, Juan, is that there's 2 continuums we're working with. And on the first continuum is that as you progress as a paddler, there is always coaching and training. And as you advance, that coaching and training should also increase, not decrease.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So that's one.
And that coaching can be formal or can be informal. No. It's like that for me. It's also important, because some people say, oh, when you talk about this, it's basically because you want people to, you know, be the eternal student, but that doesn't mean it's not really true. But there needs to be like a, you know, a kind of like you need to go out in the water with people with more experience that can actually coach you and provide you that kind of like comfort zone for your learning to be actually more efficient. No, because if everybody is like cruxing in the water, nobody's really learning. Everybody's kind of like surviving. Right. So basically, what I kind of like brought up in this slide, first you have like the skills, you know, going from left to right, kind of like basic skills, and getting more and more like technical in a way, and more advanced, let's say, especially talking about hard skills in the beginning, and then talking about more like of self-awareness, more about leadership skills and teamwork skills, from the mid to the far end to the right. But then also giving people an idea of like, okay, if you're learning to kayak, you know, first you need to stay close to the shore, because the shore is always going to be like your protection in a way. No, does that make sense? And then kind of like, and always go out in a group. And as you start gaining confidence and gaining skills, through training and experience and exposure, you can start then maybe like kayaking by yourself, you know. But that's kind of like a mid or more advanced skill, because if you do that, you need to have a perfect domain of your like self-rescue skills. No, so awesome. it wouldn't be like recommended to tell somebody, oh yeah, you can go kayak by yourself, if you're not very good self-rescuing yourself. that make
So
sense?
Juan, let me pause there and unpack that a little bit. I get where
Yeah.
you're going with it. So on the one continuum that you've identified, the vertical axis is that we're always engaged in coaching and training in some degree, and we're responsible for that. And that the more advanced we get, that should increase. And so the use of our seamanship model to talk about that helps us build that awareness on our teams about where am I going to get my coaching or training from in an informal session in a group at all times. So you're always looking for that. So the more advanced paddler is looking for those opportunities for coaching and training that are accessible. And also, it sounds like looking for opportunities of the role they need to play, providing the coaching or training for those that may not have the same skill set as them. But collectively, it informs where they can go. And that brings us to the other continuum, which is the advancement incrementally of experiences and exposures. And I think what you're pointing at is experiences, is there are natural progressions with skills development that are in alignment with how we get exposure to those.
Exactly.
Okay,
I think,
great.
yeah, totally. And for example, you know, the poll that you just took, it's great because I think for me, like getting exposed and moving out of the comfort zone, it's extremely valid. Obviously, you need to do it in a secure setting, no? Like, and that security, it can mean like, or you go with a good amount of people that have more experience and will know how to manage a situation if you need help. Or you, I don't know, like let's say stay close to the shore, or to go in a super sunny day that there's going to be no problem if you capsize and you're swimming and all that kind of stuff. So how you set yourself for success and push that limits in a safe manner.
Yeah, you know what I love about this one is it really invites us, right, to as we increase our experience and exposures, to always reach back to those skills and bring them in to the more advanced experience and exposure. Because if we can do an assisted rescue in flat water where we practice it all the time, it's not necessarily functional in force 4 or force 5 conditions. So incrementally, once we get it down in calm conditions, then we need to incrementally advance it. So every time we take a step in exposure and experiences, we also need to have our ship part, our technique, catch up and advance. Did I get that right?
Yeah. And basically, the other day in May, we went with 4 friends to do a surf kayaking trip to the Atlantic, and all of us, like, we all roll the kayak well, like really good skills, but some of my friends, they haven't been in the ocean for a while, especially with surf conditions, no? And it was interesting. Basically, one of them capsized. He couldn't roll, so he was swimming. And another friend who's like extremely agile with the kayak, he was like, 20 feet away, and he didn't get involved. And I was far away, and I had to paddle quickly and did like the rescue in the surf zone quickly and get my friend up and blah, blah, blah. And then we had a talk, and basically my friend was like, dude, like, I didn't know how to react. Like I know how to do a rescue, but I didn't know if a wave was going to catch me and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, like, you guys need to practice. We need to get out there and like do it and practice, because you've been kayaking for a long time and you are an amazing kayaker. So if you expose yourself to these conditions, you need to know how to react. And let's do it now that we are like in a small group, and I'm here, that I can help you. And the wind is coming from the ocean, so nothing's going to happen. Basically.
Yeah. So that's a very powerful teaching story. It sounds like very recently you found yourself in a peer situation with paddlers who were accomplished, and they had the skill in a certain condition, but they couldn't apply it functionally in the condition where they actually really needed it. Exactly. And that was something that was a surprise to you.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
And it was a surprise to them as well. So, and I was like, dude, like, that's when you have to think about self-awareness. Like, if you organize a trip in the surf and the plan is to go surfing, you need to know that all these skills, you have to apply them in that scenario. So it was interesting. Actually, that guy stayed out in the shoreline for a day thinking for the next trip.
Awesome. So super powerful teaching story. Now, I think you've identified that the soft skills are super important. That being able to underscore this whole progression of an increase in coaching and training as experiences and exposures also increase as you advance as a paddler. That the one skill that also that goes along with this, that is the constant, if you will, is that you're always also developing that soft skill element. How do you help folks that you coach understand the importance of that leadership development?
Basically, doing a lot of debriefs of each outing, and kind of like analyzing the decision-making processes and saying, okay, like, what's the learning today, and okay, how did you feel when this happened, okay, and how can we work on your confidence for things to go different in the next scenario that we're going to experience. So basically, and increasing the communication, because a lot of the problems, especially when you're talking about competent kayakers, or let's say mid to competent kayakers, there's a lot of things that we take for granted, no? So and we stop talking about certain issues that are very important. So I think communication and working and how we're going to work as a team. So basically, it's all about how to open yourself and how to plan ahead what can happen and how people feel and felt on the experiences that they went through.
Terrific. Yeah. So if you're going to do a debriefing, it's got to be basically front loaded with a brief. And in many ways, I know as kayakers, what we use as a brief is effective passage planning. So one thing I want to include for folks that are on this call, I'm going to put it in the chat space, is a template, a model that we use at TRAK on our expeditions and on our personal trips is an asset for passage planning. And so that in many ways is a way to constitute the brief that is in conjunction with the seamanship model. Is what do we have that's objective? What do we have that's subjective? And what are the collections of skills that we do or don't have in that? The other thing you brought up here, which is important, is the decision-making process around that in this context. And one of the things we've worked with, I don't want to really dive too deep into this, but you brought it up that really ties neatly with the three elements that you unpacked in seamanship, was this this idea of a decision-making triangle. So I just want to share with folks both on this screen. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat box as well. In just a really quick moment, how do you tie this model of decision-making with that seamanship model that you unpacked earlier?
Well, if you look at it in a way, like here, even in the risk management triangle, you already have, man factor would be man, so it's one of the elements, and then sea state and weather are the other two. So basically, provide, having a talk about, okay, how does the weather look like today, and what is it doing to the ocean or to the lake in relation to the route that we need to take. No, so basically, I think that in general, like all these tools, as soon as you start talking about them and making people think, you're like doing a progress, and it's not like rocket science, no, but a lot of times people just don't take the time to actually analyze and observe what's going on, and then put it into perspective to their reality. no,
Yeah. So
and what they want to do.
this gives us a heuristics to basically assess different things independently, and then we can
Yeah.
look at a collective measure and make a
Yeah.
sense. Is this acceptable or not acceptable?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Are we gonna be working in our comfort zone, or are we gonna be out of our comfort zone? And if we are out of
Awesome.
the comfort zone, which are gonna be the contingency plans that we will need? Okay, so what happens if somebody capsizes? You know, you start planning ahead. It's like, okay, which is gonna be our protocol for today? You know, how are we gonna navigate? Are we gonna be like, kayaking on formation or not? Or who's gonna be the lead and the sweep? And all that
Yeah.
kind of things. So those are all already like ways to manage the risk and to kind of like bring comfort to the pack as well.
Yeah, really fantastic. Yeah. So in summary, then, because this isn't a conversation about risk management so much, but it's about designing
Yeah.
a progression. And in terms of designing a progression, the keys is to think about the elements of seamanship,
Yeah.
and learn about how to be more clear in your objective assessment, how to intentionally build self-awareness in a way that is going to apply not only to yourself but in a group context,
Yeah.
and that you take the responsibility as a member of that team to have both of those awarenesses. And the ship part is, what are all the, how do we bring it all together in the form of a vessel and our own particular skill set, hard skill development, if you will. And to take those things and to provide that context for really designing ways that we can always get coaching and training to elevate as we expose or increase our experiences and exposures. And then also to underscore those two things simultaneously with the soft skill of leadership development, judgment making, decision making, or good judgment and decision making, but then also recognizing every time we increase the experience or exposure, we need to reach back to the more foundational skill and apply it in that context for it to be considered a useful and viable tool in our quiver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, really fantastic. Yeah. Love it. So let me ask you this question, Juan. Then what are your ideas in terms of that you would impress upon folks on how to teach and coach this skill we've talked about here in guiding others and for their peers and for themselves?
I think
some best practices.
Sorry.
Yeah, what are the best practices for you in that context?
First, it's kind of like basically, taking what the people need to gain that comfort. Kind of like the example that I was telling you the other day, when we did an advanced course and put a group of ex-students into like really rough waters, and some of them, have been kayaking for a long time, and they've done like many courses and so on. But nowadays, after like a long exposure and long training, finally in their head, they realize that they can be comfortable in the water and in waves, in like wavy conditions, And for me, it was amazing. It was kind of like the example of a good progression when this guy, like we were in the middle of very strong winds, big waves, bouncing waters just beside some cliffs, and he was like shouting like a teenager, of happiness and having fun with the waves. And he's like, "Oh, can I go?" Just really, really close to the cliff and really exposing himself even more. And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Like if you're happy." And I'm like, "Yes, for the first time, I'm really having fun with the waves." So in his mind, and I was like really happy because in his mind and in his comfort zone, finally he started seeing the water as a friend and as a tool to have fun instead of like the water wants to tip me over, and that's all the water wants, and it wants to make me scared. And it took a long time. So So it was kind of like a long process, to turn his fears and his insecurity in a way into like joy and relaxation, because his technical skills are not really much better than what they were, but it was all about his mindset, how to work his subjectivity, and to be calm and to realize, okay, this is totally fine. I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be relaxed. And now my waist actually is not as stiff. I'm a salsa dancer, so I can like play with the waves.
Yeah, awesome. Great.
Yeah.
Awesome. Three things I love about what you just really identified there as best practices. One is to focus on incremental changes that are going to compound over time. Two is to really celebrate successes along the way, because that helps to build confidence. And thirdly, I love what you just planted, which is transference. Bring in skill sets that they have in other areas that are applicable, like the loose hips of salsa dancing. To really apply that is just a beautiful best practice. Jan, I want to thank you so much for your time and your commitment and your expertise to presenting this community in this call. One thing I do want to share with you is, with folks here, is that you have put together a trip with TRAK. And I'm going to put a link to that right now. This is a trip in your home break. I think it's a little bit on the map behind you, but it's out of Bariloche. It's in March of 2022. Tell us a little bit about that trip in just a minute or two.
Well, that trip, basically, we start at the far end, northern part of the lake, and we basically navigate the whole western shore of the lake. And we have, amazing bays to go and explore. There's different branches of the lake that we go in, that have, waterfalls that fall all the way direct to the lake. There's some creeks and small rivers that we paddle up and explore a little bit as well. So we have a little bit of river action as well, freshwater. And basically, it can be like super mellow, sunny, like calm lake, and then also some windy, exposed points that we need to go through with a lot of fun, potential for fun. Some also open water, meaning like we have some big crossings to do on the route as well, all surrounded in a very beautiful mountain environment with beautiful forests, beautiful beaches to go and camp, very good cuisine, very good food, and the wilderness aspect of Patagonia. So basically, we will be kayaking for 4 days, probably crossing very little amount of people, maybe visiting some ranchers as well that have like their sustainable ranch, maybe eating some lamb if people are into it, some Patagonian lamb that is very well known. But basically, it's a really beautiful freshwater expedition where you can cover a good amount of mileage, and conditions, it obviously depends on the wind, but can be very variable. So, it can be opportunities to do like a lot of surfing, because we would be like going with the wind, a lot of fishing, if people are into trout fishing or fly fishing. So there's potential for many things.
Really fantastic. Sounds lovely. And paint us a picture. What's the weather like in March in Bariloche?
It's still summer.
It's still summer, so full on summer.
So full on summer. It's like, I would say average 25 degrees Celsius. So that's like what, 80, 90 Fahrenheit.
Close enough.
Yeah, and very, very usually pretty stable in March. Like we could have some rain, but in general, it's like very nice weather. And the water of the lake, the water in the lakes it's already warmer because it's been heating all summer. Yeah. So, it's good time for swims after kayaking as well. So it's perfect timing, and there's not a lot of people, even in Bariloche as a city. It's not as crowded as January and February.
And what are the odds that you actually would be guiding that trip, that we could come paddle with you on that expedition?
100% if you guys come. You just have to
Awesome.
make it here. It's like, I'm going to be guiding that trip at least 4 times this season already. So we
Awesome.
just need, you just need to confirm, come, bring your stuff here, and we'll do it.
Hey, well, I put a link into the chat for that trip. You can learn more about that. And I want to share something with you, Jan, that is hot off the press. This is the TRAK Experience Passport. And this is a product that we just have rolled out, which is a way for you to log your paddling expeditions. So you can take note and keep a record. You know, it's that, it relies on that art or element of seamanship that we call dead reckoning, right? Knowing where you are by where you've been. And this ties so nicely to what you're talking about in terms of developing your progression. And you can use this to not only qualify and get priority booking on exclusive trips as an all access pass, but it's also totally risk-free because you can invest in this and make the first step to taking a trip, but then you can apply it to whatever trip you want and get first priority on those trips. And it gives you a 10% discount on gear and accessories to help you outfit for that trip. So this is a great experience passport, a good way to get into that. I'm going to put this link in there. So if you want to get in line for this expedition or any of the other expeditions, just pulling the trigger on this is a simple first step. And then instantly you start to work with a guide, and we start, working with you to figure out what's the best trip to take with TRAK. And then we guide you all the way to getting you there on your trip. So Juan, I want to thank you for your time and your expertise on this. Tell us a couple of things, like I've got some links here for how to get in touch with you and how to follow you. What do you suggest that I share here?
You can share like the Instagram or Facebook and the website, what people like connecting through. No problem.
Okay, great. I'm going to put in the chat here that you are
Yeah.
Andemita.wildernesssystems.specialists on Facebook and Andemita Patagonia on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I know you've got some great content on YouTube, so I'm going to include that with Andemita Patagonia as well, so people can get more of a glimpse of really where you are in that piece. And so the one other asset that I want to give here is TRAK also provides paddlers a video progression that shows best practices on certain skill sets that apply to the ship part, whether it's forward stroke or bracing or sweep strokes. All those things that were in Juan's graph of experience and exposures are broken down for you in a video format to develop your skills. And I'm going to put a link to that in the chat room as well. So TRAK Foundations at foundations@trakkayaks.com. Join for free. It's our foundations program to really help all paddlers to get to improve their competence and confidence on the water. Feel free to share it with folks that you're coaching with or mentoring, so that your whole pod can be in alignment around, how to do certain skills, how to talk about rescues, assisted or unassisted. So I invite you to use that as a tool with your audiences to do what Jan is really encouraging us here to focus on our skills training, focus on getting coaching, both formally and informally, and having more fun on the water. So I want to thank you, Jan, so much. This has been a blast. Thanks for coming to us from the lovely Patagonia. And at this point, I certainly invite people to put questions in the chat, or we're just going to hang out here. We're going to end the recording, and we're going to just officially eddy out and to hang out. So I invite you to unmute your mic, say hi to Jan or Juan here in Patagonia, and let's get this party started. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. It was awesome.